Welcome back to the Local Footy Show. As we mentioned at the start of the show, tomorrow marks a sad anniversary in football because it's 119 years ago tomorrow that the Flower of Mornington, virtually the entire Mornington Football Club, disappeared in a boating tragedy. This is one of the few monuments in Australia dedicated to Australian rules football. It's here at the main street at Mornington to commemorate the loss of 15 young footballers from the Mornington Football Club on the night of May 21, 1892. In one of Victoria's worst boating disasters, the infant seaside town of Mornington lost the flower of its youth and almost its entire football team. Dialloc historian John McNaughton, who chronicled the tragedy in his book The Red and Whites, takes up the story.
Well, the 1892 boat disaster brought more publicity for the Dialloc Football Club than any other game we've ever played in. On the 21st of May 1892, Dialloc played a team from Mornington. In 1892 there wasn't a regular competition, so the games were organised by the secretary of each club. The other problem in 1892 was transport, and while trains went down to Mornington, commenced in 1891, they were steam trains and they ran at very irregular intervals. So most of the games that were organised were against local clubs where you could get to by horse and buggy. On the fateful day, Dialloc played Mornington on the Beach Road Oval. At that stage there were 20 players aside, and at the conclusion of the game it was called a draw. Both sides kicked 1 goal apiece, but Mornington kicked more behinds than Dialloc did. But in those days, behinds didn't count on the scoreboard. So the game finished as a draw. At the conclusion of the game, the players journeyed up to Renaissance Hotel, which is the hotel we're standing in now, and had some light refreshments before proceeding back to Mornington. Some of the players arrived at Dialloc by train, some came on horseback, and some came by boat. And a Mornington fisherman, Charles Hooper, had specially fitted his fishing boat with racing sails so that he could bring approximately 18 to 20 of the participants to Dialloc by boat. So at the conclusion of the game, after light refreshments at Renaissance, they journeyed down to the pier where they were seen off by some Dialloc folk, and they left the Dialloc pier about 6 o'clock. And they should have arrived back in Mornington by about 8:30, 9 o'clock. As the evening progressed, people that were waiting on the Mornington pier for the boat to arrive, and after 9 o'clock, some of the parents of the players got very concerned that there was no sign of the boat. So about 10 o'clock, one of the parents jumped at his horse and cart and came up to Dialloc just to see what had happened if the players had left. And when he arrived at Dialloc about 10:30 to hear the news that the players had left, he realised what had happened and the boat was lost. The boat was eventually found upturned. There were no survivors. There was one person's body tangled up in the rigging of the boat, and approximately 2 weeks later another body was washed up down at Mount Eliza. And about a month later, there was a body found at Rosebud. A public appeal was launched, and in excess of £1,600 was raised. From that public appeal, £75 was used to build a monument. You could imagine what impact on a town of Mornington that this would have had. In 1892, the population of Mornington was less than 1,000 people. It was purely a fishing village, and to lose 15 of their youth was a tragic episode. The local minister in Mornington had 3 of his sons drown in the tragedy, and Charles Hooper, whose fishing boat was used, also had a son on board the boat. It's still a mystery as to what happened, but it's believed that a squall blew up somewhere off Mount Eliza, and one of the ropes holding the sail snapped, and because all the players were sitting on one side of the boat turned over. The newspapers of the day gave great coverage to the tragedy, and the metropolitan newspapers outlined the borders of their article covering the tragedy with a black boundary, something that was only reserved for the death of royalty.
It's now 119 years since this tragedy plunged the then small township of Mornington into shock and deep mourning. The two clubs still mark the occasion with an annual trophy between their veterans teams. And although the last survivor of the tragedy, the team's captain Thomas Coxhall, died in 1957 at the age of 91, this monument ensures that the memory of all those young footballers will not fade away.